In a revelation that's sending shockwaves through Pan-Africanist circles and beyond, documents and reports have surfaced indicating that Burkina Faso's military leader, Captain Ibrahim Traorè, has overseen the receipt of substantial loans from the International Monetary Fund, IMF, the very institution he has publicly lambasted as a tool of neocolonialism and economic entrapment. This apparent contradiction is forcing supporters and critics alike to pause and ponder. Is Traoré the revolutionary hero he claims to be, or is there a more calculated game at play in Ouagadougou? Traoré, who seized power in a September 2022 coup at the age of 34, quickly positioned himself as a beacon of African sovereignty. In fiery speeches and media appearances, he has repeatedly denounced the IMF and similar Western-led financial bodies for imposing crippling conditions on African nations, perpetuating debt cycles, and undermining self-reliance. "We will not beg for crumbs from those who seek to control us," Traoré declared in a 2023 address to the nation, echoing sentiments that resonated across the continent. He has championed Burkina Faso's gold mining sector as a pathway to independence, vowing to redirect revenues toward domestic development without foreign strings attached. His rhetoric has drawn comparisons to historical figures like Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's iconic Che Guevara of Africa, whom Traoré often invokes as inspiration. Yet, beneath this anti-imperialist facade, a different narrative emerges from official IMF records and financial disclosures. In September 2023, just a year into Traoré's rule, the IMF's executive board approved a 48-month arrangement under the Extended Credit Facility, ECF, for Burkina Faso, totaling SDR 228.76 million, approximately $302 million. This package was designed to address protracted balance of payments problems amid shocks like the COVID-19 aftermath, food insecurity, and regional instability. An initial disbursement of about $31.8 million followed immediately, with subsequent tranches tied to performance reviews. Fast forward to recent months. In a move that has flown under the radar for many, the IMF disbursed another $33.2 million to Burkina Faso following a positive review of its economic reforms. Sources attribute this clearance to revenues from the gold sector, which Traoré's administration has indeed bolstered through nationalization efforts. However, the irony is stark. The same leader who rails against debt traps and permission slips from international lenders is now entangled in a program that requires adherence to IMF-prescribed fiscal disciplines, transparency measures, and governance reforms. Delving deeper, the ECF arrangement isn't a one-off. It's a structured commitment. By the end of 2024, Burkina Faso's obligations to the IMF stood at around 324 million special drawing rights, SDRs, equivalent to roughly $434.5 million, in addition to broader external debts totaling about $5.6 billion. Fact checks have debunked viral claims that Traoré outright rejected IMF or World Bank aid. Instead, his government has actively engaged, receiving funds in 2023 and 2024. This includes emergency financing under the IMF's food shock window in March 2023, aimed at mitigating the impacts of Russia's war in Ukraine on food prices. Why the secrecy? While the IMF's approvals are public, the details have not dominated headlines in Burkina Faso or internationally, overshadowed by Traoré's high-profile moves like expelling French troops, aligning with Russia for security, and launching megaprojects touted as loan-free. Critics argue this creates an illusion of independence. It's like preaching abstinence while quietly stocking up on indulgences, one anonymous Burkinabe economist told reporters. Supporters, however, point to the context. Burkina Faso faces jihadist insurgencies controlling nearly 40% of the territory, displacing millions and straining budgets. The loans, they say, are pragmatic necessities for humanitarian aid and infrastructure, not betrayals. Public sentiment is fracturing. On social media platforms like X, formerly Twitter, the dissonance is palpable. One user, at @BacheloriDawn, posted a video highlighting the loans, quipping, "So Ibrahim Traoré, the darling of the enemies of Nigeria, has been collecting IMF loans." Another, at @R_Alflaposh, questioned, "So Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso has taken a total of $33.2 million IMF loans. Where are his supporters and lovers again?" Even in pro-Traoré circles, there's unease. A Facebook post warned, "Please Traoré must not take Western money," reflecting fears of entrapment. Zooming out, This raises profound questions about Traoré's strategy. Is he genuinely navigating a tightrope between ideology and reality, using IMF funds as a temporary bridge to true autonomy? Burkina Faso's economy has shown glimmers of progress. Gold production up, a 90% performance rate on key indicators, and projects launched without overt reliance on traditional lenders. The IMF itself has praised the country's economic boom, unlocking further funding. Or is this a facade for deeper compromises? Reports suggest the loans come with strings: fiscal austerity, debt sustainability assessments, and reforms that could limit Traoré's populist spending. In a 2024 World Bank IMF assessment, Burkina Faso's debt distress was rated moderate, citing political instability post-coup as a risk factor. Moreover, misinformation swirls around Traoré's stance. Social media abounds with false narratives. Claims he paid off all external debt in March 2025, debunked, or outright rejected IMF offers, also false. These myths amplify his heroic image but crumble under scrutiny. As one YouTube analysis pondered, is Traoré trapped? Suggesting the loans might be a reluctant necessity amid tight regional financing and donor wariness. The implications ripple far. For Pan-Africanists, Traoré's actions test the limits of radical rhetoric in a globalized economy. Can a leader decry the system while dipping into its coffers? For Burkina Faso's 20 million people, grappling with poverty rates over 40% and ongoing insecurity, the loans could mean vital relief or future burdens. As debates rage from Lagos to Addis Ababa, one thing is clear. The captain's course is under intense scrutiny, with whispers growing louder about whether his revolution is as pure as proclaimed. As the dust settles on the initial revelations of Burkina Faso's covert dalliances with the International Monetary Fund, IMF, the narrative deepens into a labyrinth of ideological fervor and pragmatic survival. Captain Ibrahim Traorè, the young firebrand who stormed into power vowing to dismantle the chains of neocolonialism, has long positioned himself as the vanguard of African liberation. His speeches, laced with echoes of Thomas Sankara's revolutionary zeal, have electrified crowds from the dusty streets of Ouagadougou to online forums across the continent. Yet, the emergence of what sources describe as leaked IMF transaction records from 2023 to early 2026 paints a portrait of quiet capitulation, igniting a firestorm of doubt that now reverberates through the Sahel and the nascent alliance of Sahel states, AES. Traoré's anti-neo-colonial rhetoric has been nothing short of a clarion call. In a landmark address that went viral in 2024, he lambasted the IMF and World Bank as modern weapons designed to handcuff African nations, declaring, "These debts are traps. We are not being helped, we are being handcuffed." Drawing parallels to Sankara's era, Traoré has repeatedly framed international lenders as perpetuators of dependency, insisting Burkina Faso could forge its path through self-reliance. "We will not kneel," he thundered in a 2025 speech, rejecting what he called a $3 billion IMF debt relief deal as theft wrapped in courtesy, demanding 40% of gold and oil revenues as collateral. This stance resonated deeply in a region scarred by French exploitation and Western-backed regimes. Traoré's moves, expelling French troops, nationalizing gold mines, and pivoting to Russian alliances, were hailed as acts of defiance. He ditched salary hikes for officials, stuck to his captain's pay, and launched megaprojects like a national gold refinery processing 150 tons annually, all purportedly without Western loans. "Africa will not kneel," he proclaimed in analyses of his speeches, exposing how bodies like the IMF manipulate through austerity and control. This anti-IMF fervor extended to broader neo-colonial critiques. Traoré accused the CFA franc of being a colonial relic, vowing to escape financial control that influences politics. In 2025, he blocked what was described as a $200 billion IMF gold deal, labeling it an economic coup. Supporters saw him as Sankara reborn, rejecting assistance to prove Africans handling their own affairs. Even US AFRICOM's criticisms of democratic backsliding were dismissed as hypocritical imperialist propaganda. His words inspired Pan-Africanists, with viral clips, some later debunked as AI-generated, amplifying messages like, "The Africa you showed us wasn't real. You're not free press, you're corporate press." But here's the twist that has left observers reeling. Despite this barrage of denunciations, Burkina Faso under Traoré has been steadily accruing IMF funds. What began as whispers has escalated with the surfacing of detailed transaction histories, allegedly leaked from internal IMF ledgers, chronicling a series of disbursements that belie the public posturing. Starting in March 2023, just months after Traoré's coup, the IMF approved $80.77 million under the food shock window for emergency needs tied to global crises like the Ukraine war. This was followed by the September 2023 ECF approval for $302 million over 48 months, with an initial tranche of $31.8 million. The leaked records delve deeper, revealing a pattern of incremental inflows. By June 2025, the third ECF review unlocked $32.8 million, praised for supportive policies amid agricultural boosts despite insecurity. November 2025 saw a staff-level agreement paving the way for more, and by February 2026, just days ago, the fourth review disbursed another $33.2 million, bringing ECF totals to $165.8 million. Adding fuel to the fire, the IMF simultaneously greenlit a $124.3 million RSF through 2027, focused on climate resilience, reforms integrating fiscal governance, state-owned enterprises, and green financing. Outstanding obligations? By early 2026, Burkina Faso's IMF credit had ballooned to $343.62 million SDRs, about $460 million, up from $319.54 million the prior month. Fact checks have repeatedly debunked claims of outright rejection or debt payoffs. Instead, the government has engaged actively, with IMF visits yielding praise for ambitious reforms and a 5% growth projection for 2026. These transactions, if truly leaked, expose the strings attached. Adherence to fiscal deficits, domestic financing caps, and performance criteria like revenue mobilization from gold exports, up 43% in 2025. One C1OB insiders whisper that while Traoré rails publicly, the funds address dire needs, jihadist threats displacing 2 million, poverty at 40%, and humanitarian crises. But the optics are damning. A leader who blocks gold seizures and demands audits of past IMF loans is now deeper in the fold. The shockwaves are rippling across the Sahel and AES. In Mali and Niger, Traoré's allies in the anti-Western bloc, leaders like Assimi Goïta and Abdourahmane Tiani have echoed his rhetoric, withdrawing from ECOWAS and courting Russia. Yet, this revelation threatens the alliance's unity. AES was forged on promises of sovereignty, but if Burkina Faso is quietly IMF-bound, does it undermine the bloc's credibility? In Bamako, murmurs suggest Malian officials are reassessing their own stances, fearing similar exposures. Nigerian activists on social media decry potential hypocrisy, with one post questioning, if Traoré takes the poison he preaches against, what hope for AES? The region's jihadist insurgencies, controlling swathes of territory, add urgency. Funds could mean arms or aid, but at what cost to independence? Pan-African forums buzz with debates. Is this pragmatic realism amid impossible contradictions like climate crises and sabotage, or a Bonapartist illusion? DAF3 IMF's own admissions of Burkina's shining star progress, robust growth, surplus current accounts, only heighten the irony. As these details unfold, the Sahel holds its breath. Traoré's supporters rally, framing loans as tactical maneuvers for eventual breakout. Detractors see betrayal. The leaked histories, spanning emergency aid to sustain facilities, force a reckoning. In the harsh arithmetic of governance, does ideology bend to necessity, or is the revolution quietly mortgaged? As the revelations about Burkina Faso's deepening ties to the IMF continue to unfold, attention now turns to the glittering array of development projects spearheaded by Captain Ibrahim Traorè. From sprawling factories to expansive road networks and modern hospitals, these initiatives have been marketed as triumphs of self-reliance, funded by the nation's gold boom and domestic ingenuity. But with leaked transaction histories showing a steady influx of IMF dollars since 2023, a nagging question emerges. Could these very projects, symbols of Burkina Faso's revolution, be underpinned by the international lenders' loans? The dissonance is fueling intense speculation across the Sahel, where Traoré's anti-neocolonial banner clashes with the practicalities of governance in a crisis-hit nation. Let's start with the factories, which have become cornerstones of Traoré's economic vision. In a bold push for industrialization, the administration has launched several high-profile ventures. Take the new cement factory in Burkina Faso, a project aimed at ending decades of costly imports that drained resources for building roads, schools, homes, and hospitals. Announced under Traoré's watch, this facility promises to bolster local construction and reduce dependency on foreign suppliers. Similarly, the AgroServe Industry agro-industrial complex stands out as a mega-project transforming agricultural processing, with investments pouring into value-added production for exports. And then there's the Faso Mebo Development Project, part of a broader slate of 20 mega-developments, including rebranded energy initiatives and industrial zones. Traoré's government has touted these as self-funded through gold revenues. Burkina Faso's mining sector, reformed under his regime, saw a 43% export surge in 2025, generating surpluses that ostensibly finance such endeavors. Yet, peel back the layers, and IMF fingerprints appear. The fund's reviews repeatedly praise Burkina Faso's mining reforms as key to economic resilience, unlocking disbursements like the $33.2 million in February 2026. These loans, under the Extended Credit Facility, ECF, are designed for budget support, creating fiscal space for priority spending. In IMF parlance, this means funds indirectly bolster reforms that enhance revenue mobilization. Exactly what's happening in the gold sector. Could IMF cash be freeing up domestic budgets for factories? Leaked ledgers from 2023 show initial tranches coinciding with early project launches. The March 2023 food shock window payout of $80.77 million came just as agro-industrial plans ramped up. By June 2025, another $32.8 million followed a review highlighting agricultural boosts. Critics argue this isn't coincidence. The ECF's performance criteria tie disbursements to governance improvements in state-owned enterprises, many in climate-sensitive sectors like mining and agriculture, precisely where these factories operate. The new Resilience and Sustainability Facility, RSF, of $124.3 million, approved in 2026, explicitly aims to catalyze green financing for such projects, integrating climate reforms into public investment. Shifting to infrastructure, Traoré's road-building spree is perhaps the most audacious. After 62 years of independence, Burkina Faso had only 3,642 kilometers of paved roads by 2022, a statistic Traoré has weaponized to rally national pride. His response: an ambitious pledge to construct 5,000 kilometers annually, surpassing 6 decades of prior efforts. The government acquired over 900 machines for local contractors, rejecting foreign firms to empower Burkinabe workers. Key projects include the Ouagadougou-Bobo-Dioulasso Highway, a 332 kilometers expressway cutting travel times and boosting logistics, and the Kaya-Barcelogo Road, part of a $357 million push for regional connectivity. By 2025, reports claim 8,000 kilometers delivered, with day and night shifts defying expectations. Rail enhancements, like the new GL30 locomotive, further underscore this transport revolution. But again, the IMF shadow looms. The fund's support is framed as enabling additional projects and social spending through concessional financing. In the 2026 budget draft, a fiscal deficit of up to 3.5% of GDP accommodates external funds not yet budgeted, space that could channel IMF dollars into infrastructure. Transaction histories reveal disbursements aligning with road launches. The September 2023 ECF kickoff of $302 million over 48 months came amid initial machine purchases. IMF projections laud 5% GDP growth in 2026, driven by services and agriculture, but insecurity in mining areas weighs heavy, suggesting loans bridge gaps in domestic funding. Moreover, the RSF's focus on climate-resilient infrastructure could indirectly support roads in vulnerable regions, with reforms mandating fiscal caps that free up resources for such megaworks. Health and social projects add another layer. Traoré's regime has initiated hospital upgrades and a staggering plan for 50,000 free modern homes for the homeless, alongside 70,000 more in a $50 million push for housing, factories, and hope. These are positioned as people-centered, funded by national efforts like public works and gold surpluses. Yet, IMF documents emphasize humanitarian aid amid 2 million displacements from jihadist threats. The 2023 emergency financing targeted food insecurity, but broader ECF goals include social spending floors. In June 2025 criteria were met, unlocking funds that could trickle into health infrastructure. With poverty at 40% and insecurity straining budgets, The $460 million in outstanding IMF credit by early 2026 might be the unseen scaffold holding these initiatives aloft. The deeper one digs, the murkier it gets. Supporters insist these projects stem from Traoré's rejection of foreign dependency. No IMF strings visible in public narratives, just local machines and labor. Detractors point to the math. Burkina Faso's external debt hit $5.6 billion by 2024, with IMF loans comprising a growing slice. The fund's praise for ambitious reforms and 90% program compliance suggests a symbiotic relationship, where loans enable the fiscal breathing room for factories, roads, and hospitals without overt admission. As the Sahel watches, the AES alliance teeters on this paradox. Is Traoré masterfully using IMF funds as a stealth tool for sovereignty, or has the anti-colonial crusader become ensnared in the very web he decries? With gold shining bright and disbursements flowing, Burkina Faso's path forward remains a riddle wrapped in revolution. Only time, and perhaps more leaks, will tell.